Imagine this. You're sitting in a quiet room. No noise, no movement, just the soft hum of your own breathing. But inside your mind, a storm is raging. You're replaying something someone said to you 2 days ago. Maybe it was a look, a careless comment, a subtle rejection, or maybe it was something worse. Betrayal, dismissal, humiliation. Whatever it was, it stuck to you like wet clothes. Your body is still, but your soul, agitated. You try to let it go. You tell yourself it doesn't matter, that you're above it, that it's in the past. But then it creeps back in. It always does, like a splinter under the skin. You can't see it anymore, but you can feel it, constantly. Why does it get to you? Why does it still have power? Why does someone else's opinion, glance, silence, or presence seem to hijack your peace? Why can a single moment, often fleeting, often meaningless in hindsight, sink its hooks so deep into your nervous system that you lose hours, days, sometimes years, trying to feel okay again? It's not just words or actions that torment you. Sometimes it's the mere idea of someone watching you, judging you, noticing your failure, measuring your worth in silence. Sometimes it's the fear of not being enough, or worse, of being too much, too loud, too emotional, too ambitious, too slow, too soft. So you shrink, you shape-shift, you play roles, you become who you think they want you to be, and slowly, bit by bit, you disappear. Here's the paradox. You want to be free, but you're addicted to their validation. You want peace, but you give your power away to anyone with a face. You want control, but your emotional leash is tied to the unpredictable hands of others. Nobody taught you how to protect your inner world. Nobody showed you how to keep your center firm while the world spins. And so, you became porous, like a sponge soaking up every emotion, expectation, and rejection around you. Tell me, how many times have you rewritten a text just to make it sound okay? How many times have you said yes just to avoid being disliked? How often do you walk away from a conversation, wondering what you should have said, and in that wondering, who exactly are you trying to please? Now, imagine this instead. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing nobody can touch you anymore, not emotionally, not mentally, not spiritually. You are no longer penetrable. Someone insults you, their words hit the surface and fall to the floor like dry leaves. Someone rejects you, you register the fact, not the feeling. Someone tries to control, shame, gaslight, or manipulate. It doesn't work anymore. Not because you're numb, not because you don't care, but because you've rewired yourself to see the invisible strings they pull, and you no longer dance. This isn't indifference. This is self-possession. This is what it means to return to yourself. But here's the bitter truth. Most people never get there. Most people live their whole lives ruled by invisible forces, a raised eyebrow, a disapproving sigh, a social script they never questioned. And they call it being a good person. They call it humility. They call it normal. But what if normal is just a long chain of invisible cages? And what if the key was never lost, just buried under decades of obedience, people-pleasing, and emotional outsourcing? Now ask yourself, what would your life look like if you no longer feared losing love? If silence didn't feel like punishment? If your worth was unshakable, even in the face of disapproval? What would change if nothing and no one could affect you the way they do now? Hold that question. Let it hang in the air like thick smoke. Because the truth behind it isn't just personal. It's existential. It doesn't just change your mindset. It changes who you are. In the next section we'll go deeper, not into surface-level solutions, but into the roots of the problem, why this happens, where it began, and why almost nobody sees it for what it is. Because until you understand the architecture of your emotional prison, you'll keep decorating the walls, thinking it's home. You weren't born this way. You didn't enter this world worrying about opinions, shame, or rejection. As a child, you screamed when you were angry, laughed when you were amused, and cried when you were hurt. You were whole, undiluted, raw. So what happened? It began quietly. First, a voice, maybe a parent, teacher, or friend, told you you were too much or not enough. Then came the rules. Don't say that. Don't act like that. Don't feel that. Then came the labels. Good girl, bad boy, troublemaker, sensitive, lazy, dramatic, and like wet cement, your psyche absorbed it all. You began to monitor yourself, to watch yourself through the eyes of others, to anticipate punishment, reward, approval, or abandonment. This was your first form of survival, becoming who the world needed you to be, even if it meant abandoning who you actually were. Psychologically, this is known as the false self. Donald Winnicott, a psychoanalyst, coined the term to describe how children adapt to unresponsive or emotionally rigid environments. Instead of expressing their true self, they mold a version that gains safety and love. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to function in society. But here's the catch: wear the mask too long, and you forget it's not your face. And so, you became a curated self. You edited your thoughts, dimmed your emotions, and deleted your instincts to fit into boxes that made other people comfortable. This adaptation isn't just psychological, it becomes biological. Your nervous system gets trained like a watchdog, hyper-vigilant to tones, facial expressions, and perceived threats. A raised voice becomes danger. A cold silence becomes rejection. Your body tightens. Your breath shortens. You brace for impact, even when there is none. This is not weakness. This is programming. This is trauma, not always in the dramatic sense of abuse or catastrophe, but in the subtle, consistent denial of your authentic self. Now, layer on top the societal structure. We live in a world that thrives on insecurity. From advertising to education, you're constantly told, you're not enough unless you buy this. You're not lovable unless you look like that. You're not worthy unless you produce, achieve, hustle, win. Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "A man can do what he wants but not want what he wants." Let that sink in. You can chase freedom, but what if the very desires driving you are not yours? What if your longing to be liked, accepted, admired, validated, was installed in you? And what if this longing makes you controllable? Because when your worth depends on others, you are not free. When your peace depends on circumstances, you are not stable. And when your sense of self is tied to how you're perceived, you do not exist. Only a mirror exists, a reflection of expectations. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist, explored this agony in his concept of the gaze. The moment we realize someone else is looking at us, we become an object in their world. We begin to see ourselves not as we are, but as we appear. And in that moment we lose something: sovereignty, presence, truth. Sartre said, hell is other people. Not because people are bad, but because when we live for their gaze, we die in our own. This is the hidden architecture of your emotional fragility. You are ruled not by reality, but by the interpretation of it. You suffer not from what happens, but from what you imagine it means about you. And here's the most haunting part. You think you are reacting to the present, but most of the time you are reacting to the past. The tone of your boss reminds you of your father. The silence of your partner reminds you of your emotionally unavailable mother. The rejection from a friend awakens the loneliness of being excluded as a child. Your body remembers, and it keeps the score. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose. But most people never access that space, because their entire system is hijacked by old scripts, ancient wounds, and invisible ghosts. So you react, you spiral, you replay, you suppress, and then you wonder, why does this still affect me? It affects you because you were never taught to process pain. You were only taught to perform, to behave, to move on, to not feel. So you never learned how to self-regulate. You only learned how to self-abandon. This is the hidden problem. Not the people who hurt you. Not the critics or the haters, but the deep unconscious contract you signed. If I can just be good enough, maybe I'll finally be safe. But what if safety doesn't come from being good? What if it comes from being whole, even when that wholeness is messy, complicated, defiant, and unapologetic? The roots of your suffering are not in your present. They are buried in your identity structure, built from childhood conditioning, societal programming, and inherited emotional contracts. And until you see that, you'll keep trying to fix your pain by fixing people. You'll keep trying to feel free by being liked. You'll keep trying to be enough in a world that profits from your doubt. But what happens when you realize the system itself is the problem? What happens when you stop playing the game entirely? What happens when you look in the mirror and say, I will no longer live as a reaction to the world, I will become the cause? That moment is coming. But first, you need to see the price you've paid for not knowing. The real consequences. The quiet ways this unseen wound has shaped your entire life. That's what we'll explore next. The damage you didn't even know was happening. The chains you can't see, but feel every day. You think you're functioning. You wake up, get dressed, go to work, interact, smile, post, reply, scroll. But underneath all of it, something is off. A dull ache, a low-grade anxiety, a quiet discontent you can't quite name. You've convinced yourself this is normal, that everyone feels this way. And you're right, most do. But common is not the same as healthy. Let's be brutally honest now. Living in constant emotional reaction, trying to manage other people's opinions, navigating imaginary judgments, dodging rejection, is not living. It's performing. It's surviving. It's dying slowly in a costume. Here's the trap. It's silent. It doesn't look like suffering. It looks like overthinking. It looks like perfectionism. It looks like busyness. It looks like being nice. But underneath those polished surfaces is a core wound. You do not feel safe being fully yourself. And this has consequences. Massive ones. 1. The death of authentic desire. You stop knowing what you actually want, not what's impressive, not what's acceptable, not what will earn you approval. What you want. You want to rest, but you work harder. You want to say no, but you smile and say yes. You want to explore, create, travel, speak. But instead you shrink into routines that feel responsible. Not because you can't break out, but because something inside whispers, what if they don't like who you really are? So you build a life of compromises, a life of almosts, a life that looks fine from the outside, but feels hollow on the inside. 2. Hypervigilance as a lifestyle. When your nervous system is wired to avoid emotional pain, you become a master at scanning your environment for threats. A shift in tone, a delayed response, an unfollow. You notice everything and interpret it as rejection. This isn't mindfulness. This is trauma-induced pattern recognition. You're not present. You're in a constant state of subtle alarm. Your body floods with cortisol at every social micro-trigger, and eventually you normalize this anxiety. You call it being sensitive. You call it caring too much. You call it being an empath. But sometimes, it's not sensitivity. It's conditioning. It's a childhood spent decoding danger. It's years of living on emotional eggshells. And the worst part, it keeps you disconnected from reality. You can't be here now because you're always trying to predict the next emotional hit. 3. Addiction to external validation. When your worth is outsourced, your self-esteem becomes fragile. You can't hold your center. You wait for someone to validate your existence. A like, a compliment, a text back. And every time you get it, it feels like oxygen. But the relief is short-lived. You need more, because it was never rooted in you to begin with. This is how the world sells to you. This is how relationships control you. This is how cults, corporations, and ideologies recruit you. They prey on your unmet need to belong. But they give you conditional belonging, the kind you have to earn, maintain, and fight for. And so you live in fear. Fear of falling out of favor. Fear of being alone. Fear of being yourself. 4. Suppressed rage and depression. When you deny your true feelings to keep others comfortable, those feelings don't disappear. They rot. They metastasize. You smile when you're sad. You laugh when you're angry. You say it's fine when it's absolutely not fine. And eventually your emotional system goes numb. You stop feeling joy. You stop crying. You stop caring. Depression isn't always sadness. Sometimes it's emotional self-betrayal that's gone on for too long. And rage is the voice of the part of you that's tired of being erased, tired of being good, tired of pretending. But you've been taught to fear your anger, so instead you suppress it. You call it maturity. You call it being rational. But sometimes maturity isn't suppression. Sometimes it's sacred rebellion. 5. The fragmented self. You become different people in different rooms. One self at work, another around friends, a different one with family, and maybe no real self at all when you're alone. This fragmentation isn't flexibility. It's identity collapse. You've learned to be whoever they need. But have you ever asked, who do I need to be for me? Because if you don't ask that question, life becomes a performance, a never-ending audition for love you'll never fully receive. Because no one can love you fully if you never show them you. This is the quiet tragedy of the fragmented self. You get praised, you get promoted, you get liked, but you feel unseen. Because deep down you know, they don't love you, They love the version you presented. And so, even in relationships, you feel alone. This is the cost of letting everything affect you. Not just emotional discomfort, but the erosion of your soul. You think you're managing it. But what you're actually doing is surviving it. And the worst part, you've adapted so well to the cage, you've forgotten there was ever a door. So what now? Do you keep pretending, keep coping, keep stitching bandages on a body that's screaming to be felt? Or do you burn it all down? The masks, the rules, the inherited fear. There is a way out, but it's not what you think. It doesn't look like becoming stronger, or tougher, or more confident. It looks like something much more radical. It looks like rebellion. Not against people, but against the part of you that believes you need to earn peace. That's where we're going next. The shift. The break. The moment you stop reacting and start creating. You don't need more confidence. You don't need more affirmations. You don't need to meditate your anxiety away or visualize yourself into self-love. You need to rebel, not in rage, in clarity. Because once you see the trap for what it is, managing perceptions, chasing validation, tiptoeing through life to avoid rejection, you have two options: play along, or burn the script. Let's get something straight. You were not put on this earth to be liked. You were not born to fit into every room, please every person, or smooth every edge of your being just to make others more comfortable. You were born to live. And that means choosing truth over approval even if your voice shakes. Here's the truth: they won't tell you. The world has no idea what to do with a person who cannot be manipulated by shame. And that person is terrifying, untouchable, free. But how do you become that person? Let's start with a shift. Not in the world, but in you. A shift so internal, so absolute, that everything outside of you begins to reorganize in response. Choose discomfort over disguise. Every time you fake a yes, a laugh, a nod, something inside you dies a little. You preserve the peace on the surface, but betray the war inside. This is the cost of conformity. Inner chaos dressed up as outer harmony. So stop it. Say no. Disagree. Be silent when you don't know what to say. Speak when your truth makes the room go quiet. Yes, it will be uncomfortable. Yes, people might be confused or disappointed. But that discomfort? That's your nervous system detoxing from years of emotional performance. Let it. You are not here to be palatable. You are here to be real. 2. Let go of the performance. The persona you've built, the charming one, the hard-working one, the funny one, the wise one, served you once. It helped you survive. It protected you when being authentic felt unsafe. Honor it for that. But now, it's the very thing suffocating you. You don't need a new identity. You need to drop the one you never chose. So try this. Sit in silence and ask, if I wasn't trying to be impressive, lovable, or successful, who would I be? Not what job you'd have. Not where you'd live, but how you'd be. How would you speak? How would you carry yourself? How would you move through space, through people, through time? Strip away the filters. Remove the performance. Who's left? That's where your freedom begins. 3. Redefine strength as self-containment. Strength is not loud. It's not controlling. It's not needing to prove anything. Strength is self-containment. It's the ability to sit with your pain without outsourcing it. It's the power to feel rejection and not collapse. It's the quiet certainty that you exist, even when no one validates it. You don't need to be unbothered. You just need to be unmoved. Let them misunderstand you. Let them walk away. Let them say what they say. Your job is not to be invincible. Your job is to remain intact, with your soul untraded for acceptance. 4. Embody sacred indifference. Sacred indifference isn't numbness, it's liberation. It's the moment you realize not everything deserves your reaction. Someone insults you. You don't explain. You don't prove. You observe. Someone ghosts you. You grieve. You move. You don't chase. Someone misjudges you. You let them. You don't correct their story. Why? Because truth doesn't need witnesses, and dignity doesn't perform for applause. Sacred indifference is not giving up. It's rising above the game. It's choosing peace over winning. It's realizing that what you are is not up for negotiation, not anymore. 5. Create, don't react. Most people are just a bundle of reactions, ping-ponging between praise and criticism, highs and lows, validation, and rejection. But you're done with that. Now, you create. Create your energy. Create your rhythm. Create your values, your voice, your way of being. Instead of reacting to what's wrong, you create what's true. This is the most subversive thing you can do in a reactive world. Be grounded in your own reality. That means cutting cords with anyone who thrives off your instability. That means walking away from roles, jobs, and relationships that require you to fragment yourself. That means choosing sovereignty over security. It won't be easy. You'll feel alone sometimes. You'll doubt yourself. But one day you'll wake up and realize you don't flinch anymore when someone pulls away. You don't chase. You don't explain. You stand. And when that day comes, you'll know you've made the shift. You've crossed the threshold. You've stopped being an effect and become a cause. So now, ask yourself, what if this was the beginning of the end of living for other people's comfort, the end of bending yourself for inclusion, the end of swallowing your truth to survive another day? What if you said, I won't do it anymore, and meant it? What if you started protecting your peace like your life depended on it? Because in many ways it does. This is your rebellion, not loud, not chaotic, but holy, precise, permanent. And once you taste this level of inner stillness, you won't go back, because the real revolution is not external. It's inside your nervous system, inside your decisions, inside the moment you realize you don't need anyone to approve of your truth for it to be real. There comes a moment after all the shedding, the silence, the rebellion, when you finally meet the version of yourself that's been buried underneath the noise. It's quiet, almost too quiet. There's no applause, no recognition, no crowd, just you, breathing in a stillness you didn't think was possible, not because the world got softer, but because you stopped giving it the power to hurt you. This is the final truth, not poetic, not dramatic, just radical in its simplicity. You were never broken. You were just trained to abandon yourself, and you believed it. You believed that peace was something you had to earn, that love was conditional, that worthiness had to be proven. But none of that was true, none of it. You were born with it, and the entire journey, the overthinking, the pretending, the striving, was just a long, painful detour back to what was always there. Let that sink in. You didn't need fixing, you needed unlearning. You've spent years looking for the solution outside of yourself. Books, podcasts, therapy, motivation, advice, all useful, but none of them could give you what you already had. Your truth, your voice, your ground, not the ground they gave you to stand on. Your ground, the one you lost, the moment you decided it was safer to betray yourself than risk being unloved. The one you buried under every fake smile, every swallowed opinion, every over-explained, sorry, but here's the secret. Nobody told you. The version of you that doesn't seek approval is the real you, and the version of you that crumbles without it was only ever scared. Let's go even deeper now, because this is not just psychological, this is existential, this is ontological, about being itself. You are not just a person in the world, you are the world, perceiving itself. You're not just reacting to life, you are life. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." But what if your why isn't some lofty purpose or external mission? What if your why is simply you, being, breathing, existing in alignment with your truth, regardless of the chaos around you? Because when you realize you don't need anyone's permission to be what you already are, you become untouchable, not in the hardened, disconnected way, but in the grounded, elemental way, like the ocean. It doesn't care if the sky is cloudy or clear. It doesn't stop moving just because someone disapproves of its waves. You become like that. Vast, deep, free. So here's the ultimate shift. You don't stop being affected by people because you become emotionally numb. You stop being affected because you no longer believe their opinion defines anything real about you. Let them love you. Let them hate you. Let them misunderstand, mislabel, misjudge. You are no longer in the business of managing other people's projections. You are in the business of truth. And truth needs no approval to exist. That's the liberation. You become the source. You become the one who gets to say, this is who I am. This is how I move. This is where I stand. And the world adjusts. Or it doesn't. But either way, you remain. Now take a breath. Feel your feet on the ground. Feel the weight of this moment. You've spent years running from parts of yourself, contorting to fit, apologizing for existing too loudly or not enough. But now, you stop. Now you return. Not to an older version, not to an imagined ideal, but to the most honest version of yourself, the one that doesn't flinch at rejection, doesn't fold for acceptance, and doesn't dilute truth for love. Because here's the final paradox. When you no longer need anyone to stay, the right ones do. When you no longer need to be chosen, you become magnetic. When you no longer fear being misunderstood, you become undeniable. Why? Because truth has gravity. And you, in your purest form, are gravity itself. So now you know, nobody and nothing will affect you again, not because the world changed, but because you did. You're no longer made of mirrors. You're made of something far more ancient. Stillness. Fire. Truth. And no one, not the ones who left, not the ones who laughed, not the ones who tried to reduce you, can touch that. You've come home. Finally. Fully. Silently. And from this place, you don't need to prove anything. You just live. No longer reacting. No longer chasing. No longer waiting. Just being. And that is everything.